Good afternoon, and welcome to day 2 of the D3 Fashion Talks at Fashion Forward. Thank you for joining us. We have an excellent turnout for Friday at 3:30, so we appreciate you being with us. Unfortunately, Rawan bin Hussein, who was supposed to be with us today, was unable to make it from Kuwait, so we thank Kat LEBRASSE for joining us. Branding, of course, in our industry is the name of the game, and there's no bigger platform than social media. So we have a wonderful talk today with some of the most compelling content creators in our region. I'm going to hand it over to KAVITA SRINIVASAN to take it off from here.
Thank you so much, Ritu. Hello, everyone. It's lovely to see you here today. Thank you for coming on a Friday afternoon. I'm going to start off by introducing Kat LEBRASSE, and then I'll go over to MTHAYEL Al-Ali. Kat LEBRASSE is most known in Dubai as a fashion and lifestyle influencer, Australian mother of 2, and curates a wonderful collection of content on motherhood, fashion, style, and she's recently turned entrepreneur as well, and works in an incredible content creation agency called Sunday, which specializes in making content by social users for social users. So could you please put your hands together for Kat LEBRASSE? MTHAYEL Al-Ali is an influencer, entrepreneur, and founder of TAKHAYYAL. Born and raised in Sharjah, she is an avid yogi, feminist, and influencer. Her agency, TAKHAYYAL, is a virtual space and social media platform that is passionate about impactful content creation. They specialize in social media and campaigns with a special focus and understanding of the Emirati culture. Thank you for joining us today, MTHAYEL. Today, we're going to explore a really important topic, one that has actually changed the face of brands today, storytelling on social media. Marketing, especially in the fashion industry, has become increasingly about brands reaching people on social media platforms. This talk will explore the roles influencers play, how brands can better work on social media platforms, and what really is the nature of authentic content as it stands today. I'm going to start with Kat, and then we'll move on to MTHAYEL. So to both of you, we'd like to first explore the role technology plays in brand storytelling. What technology platforms, Kat, do you think are most important to be on in the Middle East when it comes to brand storytelling?
I've found across the region, the most popular platforms that we have here are obviously Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, Snapchat, and Twitter. But depending on who exactly you're trying to target, using those platforms is which is the most popular. So, you'll find that with the baby boomers and the Generation X, you're looking at more platforms like Facebook that are very popular and strong usage. But if you're looking at millennials and even post-millennials, then you're looking at Snapchat and Instagram that are much more popular because they're interested in snackable content, more entertaining content, more fun content. You need to capture their attention much quicker than you can with Facebook and YouTube.
Amazing. And recently there's been TikTok as well. That's also something that is just emerging right now. MTHAYEL?
I believe, the reason TikTok is coming up is because of the spam of attention that we grew up, at least millennials, grew up with the idea of Instagram, and then it was 10 seconds, and then Snapchat was 15 seconds, and that was the maximum you can kind of grab attention and get the information delivered. So TikTok, as a trendy topic, is also there because of the very short spam attention that it actually gives the message very quickly and has been very popular lately too.
It's interesting to see how each platform has the same story conveyed in a different language. So how do you, Kat, do that? Like, how would you represent a piece of content on Instagram versus Snapchat versus YouTube versus Facebook? How do you do that?
For me, it's a matter of long-form content versus short-form content. So if you are really trying to tell a full story, then you're looking at creating long-form content. So a video, you're looking at 30 seconds to a minute, generally not longer, as we've been mentioning. people's attention spans have really reduced. So you're looking at YouTube, for example, and IGTV, where you would put that longer form content where you want people to really, really understand your story in full. And then you're using things like Instagram feed, Instagram stories, Snapchat, Twitter to lead people to those platforms so that they can see your full story. They're a bit of a teaser, if anything.
I believe when it comes to delivering the story, I think the person or the content creator should be the person who decides rather than giving what the followers want. The reason behind that is not because the followers are not important, but because he will only or she will only be true to herself and what her capabilities are into putting her focus in whatever content that she needs to create. For an example, I used to have Instagram, I used Twitter as a personal thing, and I used to use Snapchat. With time, I kind of got to the realization that I don't really give none of them 100% of my effort, and I would be true to myself if I want to have one platform that gives it to my 100% and kind of focus on it. And followers or fans will adapt to it, will be able to kind of, you will be able to build that community through that platform without trying to put yourself out there just because, and creating and focusing into what you can do and what is true to you, and it will be delivered to them really easily. So yeah, every platform is really amazing and really interesting into how do you want to deliver that story, and I can tell the same exact story through different ways. However, what would fit me more is what I would choose.
And what do you think that is for you?
Instagram, definitely.
Instagram for sure.
Yeah, the reason behind it is because once the Insta story came in, that was my alternative for Snapchat. So it was much easier for me to kind of create content when it comes to that. And it's also, I consider Instagram as my platform. As my portfolio, where I can put in the highlights or in the story or in the post, whatever I've been doing for the last couple of years. And it's been really interesting to create that very nice community that actually would come to Instagram to be part of my journey, rather than me going to Snapchat with a very limited way of expressing, if you know what I mean.
That's really interesting, because I feel like now people feel a lot of pressure to be on every platform.
Yes.
And it may be spreading yourself too thin when you do that. Yeah. So what do you think, Kat, is a platform that resonates most with people in the Middle East right now?
Definitely Instagram. I think, as MTHAYEL said, most of us as content creators chose to put 100% into one or two platforms rather than trying to spread ourselves thinly, because it's impossible to be able to use all the platforms well. You can use them all, but using them well is another story. So for me, I think in the region, Instagram is definitely number one. Snapchat is still very popular, but for the people that are using Snapchat are not usually also high Instagram users as well. They're either or. Facebook does still get a lot of use here, but again, by a completely different demographic. So it depends on who you're targeting. For me personally, I found that over the years, it was very obvious to me that my particular audience were Instagram users. That was where I saw the most amount of traction and the most amount of engagement. So that's what I stuck to, especially like you with stories. And for me, it's that generation. I kind of evolved from being somebody that was very fashion focused initially when I started my platforms, and I progressed as my own life kind of grew. I progressed my content into being very lifestyle driven, and I found that my followers have kind of taken that journey with me and become very lifestyle driven too. And so the kind of content that they want is the kind of content that is best served on Instagram as opposed to any other platform.
MTHAYEL?
I think we can bear in mind always that they're all tools, yeah? So the person can always express themselves or be who they are in any platform. It could start with blogging, it could end up in TikTok, and no matter what tool or platform you would use, there is always going to be your kind of story and your kind of reflection into that platform. I think, to me, obviously, Instagram is my way in, as I said, and it has been very interesting. It's a learning journey, and I'm sure all content creators can agree. It's been a journey. Like you would, a new feature would come up in a new tool, and you would be very interested in trying it, and can work for you and cannot. but the industry generally, social media has been evolving into bringing new features, new ways to kind of communicate with people and deliver the message. So it's about finding what works with your followers as much as it works for you to kind of create that community rather than being a content creator that creates something just one way around. It's a two ways kind of thing, unlike magazines or TVs in general. So using every feature or features that are there in every app would be an exploration kind of tour or trip for you to kind of find where you work best with.
Yeah, so I mean, we all agree that Instagram is the one that resonates the most in this region, but let's see how that changes in the future, because there's a lot coming. Telling a brand story and working with brands is very much prevaricated with your own personal brand, who you are as people before you start working with brands. So let's explore a little bit about you and your personal brand and how you created that, starting with Kat. How would you describe your personal brand story? I know you touched upon a little bit, starting with fashion and moving to lifestyle and then motherhood and everything, but how have you used Instagram or whatever platforms to convey who you really are?
I found that I really stepped into my true self when I fell pregnant with my first daughter. Previous to that, my content was purely fashion and beauty driven. And while everything was going very well, I found that my audience really kind of grew and started to really relate and engage with me when I fell pregnant. And I think that is possibly because of the relatability. I don't know, it made me a real person, I guess. I'm not sure exactly how that looks or why it became that way. But people started to really engage with me, talk to me, send me DMs, ask a lot of questions, want to know more. So that obviously encouraged me then to share more of my life. And so I am actually very public about my life on social media. I share my kids, I share my husband, my family, what we're doing, where we're going, all elements and all different facets. And that has worked very well for me. And what the comments that I get from people is that they find me very relatable. And the reason they follow me is because they know that I'm just giving my opinion on general day-to-day things. It's not necessarily paid for, it's not sponsored, it's not a partnership. It is genuinely what I do on a day-to-day basis and what I like, and people can relate to that. Yeah.
Authenticity, right?
Yeah.
MTHAYEL?
I think when it came to my brand story when I started, and I think this was a struggle, or is a struggle with every content creator or influencer, because one of the things that actually happen to you, don't really plan to be the next influencer, right? So when that happens, people kind of pin you with titles and names and kind of put you in I wouldn't say a box, but in a criteria. In my personal journey, I think for the first couple of years, I kind of was dragged into creating that persona that people wanted me to be. So the persona was, it might actually be me, but it just one of the things that was put in as a categorizing me. So it was Emirati, hijabi, influencer, a student back then, and who's very interested in fashion. And as much as that was me, I got dragged into creating content that wasn't 100% in my personality, or it doesn't really 100% reflect me, rather than creating that persona. And I was putting a lot of energy and time into how to complete that persona that was created for me. I think in the last couple of years, in the last 3 years actually, I kind of came to the realization that individuality is very important. That the fact that I kind of decided to be who I am, wear what I want, and go wherever I feel like personally, makes me a full individual that people would feel connected to, relate to, and actually see different aspects of my life, like you just said. So, for example, when they kind of like the idea that you're a mother, a lot of mothers out there kind of related to your story, and that's why they kind of loved the idea of you having kids and everything. So, if you treat yourself less than like a brand and more like a human, if that makes sense, people would relate to that, because that's the whole point of social media, right? We share our own stories, and as much as the stories are authentic and real and don't really fill into a category that was created just because, it makes better sense, and it really gives a lot of peace of mind if it makes sense, yeah.
That's really nice to hear because a lot of the time people think that everything's put on, right?
Yes.
So to know that you've created your own personal brand story purely by being yourselves and being true to yourself, I mean, that's a really good thing to hear in this day and age. Anyway, moving on. Kat, can you give us an example of how you created a story, maybe for a brand, with your personality infused into it, from idea to inception to implementation?
Okay, so this probably isn't the correct thing to say, but in a sense, I actually don't overthink it. I don't overplan it too much.
That's a great thing to say.
Especially that a lot of my content does revolve around my family. You can't plan ahead too much with children. In reality, things often don't go to plan. So generally, I do as much research as I can on a brand and make sure that I do genuinely want to work with that brand. And I have a look at what their brand ethos is, and if they have a particular look and feel, and what the DNA is. And then I try and translate that into my personality. And I have a general direction of where I want to go. And I get the camera out and I hope for the best and hope that everything kind of comes together how I see it in my head. And if it doesn't, then I work with that too and try and make that come together best I can to fit what I feel works for me, but also works for the brand.
Awesome. Easy. Or not so easy.
I think it's very challenging, to be very honest. It's very, very, very challenging for you to kind of have this whole planning process into what you're going to post. First of all, if you, as we said, very, very authentic with yourself, things can't go as you planned. You would want to post something on that day and it just doesn't happen, or you don't feel like it, because at the end of the day, we're dealing with, we worked a couple of jobs in a day, and you might one day feel like being that fashion 100% blogger that you are, but still you feel that you want to stay at home and do nothing. And that being the reality, I think my process is kind of, is more of trying to deliver the best. I work project by project, so trying to deliver what the product or the message that I want to produce or to work with on that kind of post the best way possible. And that basically comes very naturally with time. It comes at the end. One day you would go for a whole shooting day to showcase a skirt that you have. And if you take a picture of that in your own house, just sitting on your own couch, would make things more easier and more relatable to the audience. You know what I mean? So it comes naturally with you to understand your audience, kind of how would they want to relate to you, or what do they want to see, or do they want you to see you all glamorous in a photo shoot, or do you want them to, or do they want you to see you in somewhere that is very casual? And depending on that, or sensing, let's say, what the audience feels like or relating to more, you would be able to create content that is much kind of goes with the flow, and it comes really naturally with that.
Okay, so it's more spontaneous as opposed to planned strategically.
And it's very challenging comparing, because when you think about it, we are content creators, but we're also consumers at the same time. And we consume a lot of information and data and posts and things on a daily basis. We are probably consumers more than content creators, because we're there on the channel, understanding the industry as a whole more and more. So getting all that information and data towards your day kind of gives you that need to be better, or to do something nice, or to be inspired by someone else's post or someone else's way of coverage. And the more you consume, the more you get inspired, but at the same time you could be on that stage where you don't want to be someone else. You still want to kind of create content that is coming easy from you and delivering it easy to the audience, if you know what I mean. So making that comes with a flow and comes with time, and it's practice. No one woke up one day, decided to be a content creator, and kind of was 100% there into creating that content. It's always a journey, and I think we're very much learning through the journey, and the post would always change throughout the years while you're working in this job.
Well, what's great is that you have so many insights, right? You're constantly able to be on the pulse, keep your finger on the pulse of what is resonating with your audience. And as you said, your brand stories are very much things that you relate with. So yeah, I mean, I guess it's a learning process.
And I think what's unique to MTHAYEL and I as well is that because outside of our personal brands, we have other things going on as well with our own agencies. So we do actually, as consumers of social media, take a lot of time to really understand how they're used and how they should be used and how they're best used and how they're worst used. And that then helps us translate our own content on our personal levels as well. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly what I was going to ask you next about Sunday, because you yourself are creatively producing this amazing content with brands and working with influencers. And one of the things that really stood out for me with Sunday is how you said it's created by social users for social users. So can you elaborate a little bit on that ethos?
Yeah, absolutely. So Sunday, we're a social media and influencer marketing agency, and we're 3 partners. And the 3 partners, we are all very active on social media. So my partners are here today, Naila Abdelnour, who is also an influencer, and Ashley Kadzo, who also has quite a strong following. Plus our team in general as well have all used social media themselves and consider themselves influencers. They have strong followings themselves. So they're people that know the platforms themselves, that use them, that know how to best use them, and spend a lot of time, analyzing and really understanding that. So the kind of content that we create and the kind of projects that we work on, we understand them from a level of what we would want to see as a consumer. And we do the research as well. We speak to other people, we do the analysis, we frequently have, meetings and whatnot with Facebook, Instagram, etc., to really understand how to create that. So the idea is that we're creating content that we really know that users want to see. It's not so much about, it's definitely about the brand and telling a story, but it's about understanding the audience and the different audiences across the different platforms and delivering that story for those people.
Awesome. I want to talk to you a little bit about TAKHAYYAL, which is doing it's a virtual space for content creation. Can you elaborate a little bit on what you guys do?
Yeah, it takes a while for me to kind of explain it to people. Okay, so TAKHAYYAL is the word imagine in Arabic, and that's where the name came from. And TAKHAYYAL, what we work, or basically the reason I started TAKHAYYAL was because I felt that in the region, or specifically in the UAE, when it comes to UAE nationals being influencers, we really have a big gap. There's not much happening when it comes to influencers and when it comes to the content. So everything that we do in TAKHAYYAL is about creating better content, impactful content in the region. So the focus is basically us creating content, working as a consultation with different brands to create better content for them for marketing purposes or otherwise, as well as working with basically making workshops out there and trying to teach individuals, people, to create better content. So it's more of a movement, I would say, to basically create those workshops or create those talks or help people individually on that, or creating that adoption program where we help influencers, kind of new influencers or new potential influencers, to kind of adapt to what we learned personally in my experience. And we try to basically make the content in the region better. Because the way I see it is that years from now, this is our kind of history, right? So when we look back, people are going to, the same way we look at newspapers and magazines now to understand the cultures in the past, we want to create stories, content, and people that can deliver that in a better way. So TAKHAYYAL in a nutshell is a content creator movement, or a better content creator movement that I'm very, very, very much passionate about. And what I try to do is to basically reflect everything that I learned through my journey into that. Because a couple of years from now, I might not be one of the top influencers in the UAE, but what I want to be is to always be an impactful entrepreneur who kind of made a change. And that's the reason TAKHAYYAL was there.
Well, I mean, we see that that's a natural transition. Influencers are building on their own brands, like you guys, using your experience and building something more, right? I think that's a natural progression. Moving on to authentic versus sponsored content. That's a question a lot of consumers have, and a lot of brands as well. So how much of your content is unplanned? I mean, I know we've touched upon this, and from what I understand, even the sponsored content is quite spontaneous. But how much would you say, in a percentage-wise, is authentic versus sponsored content?
A couple of years ago, I sat on a similar panel to this, and one of the questions I had from the audience was, how can I tell which of your posts are sponsored and which aren't? And my answer was, the fact that you can't tell means that I'm doing a great job. Because the idea is that it shouldn't matter. It shouldn't matter to my audience whether or not it is or isn't sponsored, because I wouldn't be doing it if I didn't genuinely like the brand, the product, or the service that I'm speaking about. As a general rule, and especially nowadays with the policies that are in place, I would always put that it's a sponsored post, or even if it's not sponsored, but it's, for example, a gift or something like that. It's always there, openly said. It's usually a hashtag or whatnot these days. So it's always there for people to see. I would say as a percentage, maybe it's 60% to 40%, so 60% sponsored or in a partnership, and 40% just spontaneous, unplanned content that I've shot or that I've happened to take a really nice photo and thought, I think people would like to see this, so I'm going to share it.
I think the percentage also changes with time, right? So when you start, it could be 80% authentic and 20% is sponsored, and then with time you get more jobs, you get more agreements, you get more contracts within your kind of job, and it kind of increases. Now, as much as that's a good thing, there's always that authentic content that you still want people to relate to you without knowing that. And I think it becomes very natural, and I'm sure you agree with me, it becomes very natural because once you go on a trip, for example, and you really experience this really cool hotel, that it was a very personal experience of yours, but because it became very natural for you to show people or to tell people what's really good, it becomes something that you do constantly. And once you do constantly, people can't tell the difference, because at the end of the day, if it's one of your characteristics as a person to be that person who kind of recommends this and recommends that and would actually love to show other people good experiences, eventually your sponsored content will be very similar to that. So I think, I think it increases, but there's always very important for us to keep that authentic ones, because for some reason, audience can be a bit, how do I say this? Judgmental, maybe. Not really judgmental, but really resistant when it comes to obvious sponsored content. They don't want to feel fooled, if I might say. So I think that if we kind of stay authentic or stay creating content that is very authentic and doesn't have, let's say, a call of action out of it, people would actually feel more related to you as a person, and therefore might listen to you in your sponsored content. So you need to kind of create that kind of balance, but as I said, because we get a lot of things coming our way with sponsored content, I think that 30% is very important for us to keep very authentic and very real in order for us to keep our sponsored content going, if it makes any sense.
To add to that, I think exactly what MTHAYEL is saying, I think it's really important for all content creators to create content that isn't sponsored, because otherwise there's basically no credibility. Then people do feel like your entire social media platform or whatever it is that you're using is a sales pitch. It's a billboard. I don't think, social media should be used purely for that. There is meant to be that relatability, that engagement, that connection between people, that community. And without unsponsored content, how can we have that? So there really does need to be that non-sponsored. Yeah.
True, but how do you manage supporting brands per se that may be in conflict with those that you're a brand ambassador of? So you're unpaid by a brand, but and you're supporting it. Does that ever happen when there's a conflict with a brand that you're an ambassador of?
To be honest, no, it hasn't. I don't think, I think generally speaking, brands are fairly well aware, and you can see across our social media platforms if we're working with a brand. So I think if one were to come along that is a friend or is a brand that we just happen to like, that is in conflict with a brand that we are ambassadors of, then I think as as who we are, we wouldn't obviously post about that. Having said that though, any brand that I just happen to like, that I come across, whether it's sponsored or not sponsored, I will post about it, as long as it doesn't compete or conflict with something that I'm already working on. Because that's the nature of what I began to do in the first place. That was why I wanted to start doing what I wanted to do. I wanted to share and have people be interested in, in sharing this kind of information. So I think it's necessary. You have to do it, but I think, yes, there's a fine line, and you need to make sure, obviously, that you're not stepping on any brand's toes at the same time.
So would you check with the brands that you're an ambassador of? Sometimes is it a touch point, or?
Honestly, a lot of the brands that you work with will come forward with kind of letting you know who they will and will not be okay with you working with. So I think, generally speaking, it's fine. If it was ever to be a question in my own mind, I would definitely check with the brand in advance. But more often than not, you definitely do know in yourself.
From my personal experience, I think I did have a couple of conflicts when it comes to creating my own content or the way I wanted to do things and the brand wanted to do things. And because some brands would go into the process of telling you exactly what you should do or giving you the script sometimes. And sometimes it's about getting approvals in every post that you need to kind of go through in order for you to post that, even if you're creating your own content. The best way to deal with that, and it has been a very back and forth kind of agreement with different agencies and with different brands to kind of understand that this influencer would be creating content her way. And a lot of brands has been in the last year at least very much adapting with the idea. So they come to you wanting you to do this your way. And that, I think, works much better, at least personally worked for me much better, and it works, generally speaking. It becomes a very, because at the end of the day, if you would want everyone to post the same exact thing, where is the authenticity in that? And here where we find the audience getting really irritated or angry about the fact that you're all pushing the same exact message all over, who should we believe? And that also questions your honesty in your content. So it's a very thin line creating that relationship with different brands to be the same person, but still talking about authentically about that kind of product. Being that or doing that became very easy with time. And also, I think choosing the brands that you work with and choosing the product that you can cover and put out there is very important. Because if I would just choose a product because it's cool and it's trendy, but it's not something I would actually use, it will be very, the content will naturally won't be good because it will naturally not be natural, right? So I think it's a very thin line between sometimes you like a brand so much, but you don't really like the piece. And that's okay, and that's fine. And I think telling the brand and being honest with the brand about that is very important. So I would actually go to meetings and be like, listen, I love the brand, but I like the pieces, but let me do it my way. Or let me create the outfit the way I would create it, not the way that the designer decided to do that. And the more I work around that, agencies and brands kind of get the idea and they try to work with me the same way I want to work with them, and becomes a mutual kind of understanding.
Amazing. There's a lot of transparency there, which is great. So let's talk a little bit about our last question, about the future of brand storytelling and where you see it evolving. Because there are new social media platforms coming up and new ways of portraying information. So where do you see it going, Kat?
I honestly still see social media as a baby industry. It's still a huge learning curve, I think, especially for brands. I think that, traditionally we saw a lot of brands coming on social media sharing very standard stock imagery, cut out photography, and wondering why people weren't interacting or engaging with their brand. And nowadays you see brands creating lifestyle imagery and trying to get their audience to connect with an emotion and a little bit more and more. But I feel like this is only very recent as far as brands and companies are concerned, that they're really embracing social media properly. It's, for me, in the last maybe 12 months to 2 years where we're really seeing this come around. So I see a lot of evolvement in the future with different platforms coming along, but I still feel like the ones that exist have a lot of growth to come.
Yeah, I do agree with that. I also think every time someone asks me this question, I'll be like, okay, I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. I don't know what I'm going to do tomorrow. Trust me. But I think that the person or creating your own story as a person, as an individual, will be translated in every era or in every time or in every platform that is coming up or used to come. So we see a lot of bloggers who used to create their own blog, and then they became YouTubers, and then they became Instagrammers and maybe Snapchatters, and something else was getting up. But the one thing in common between all of them is the person, is the individual, is the mindset, is the style, is whatever she is trying or he is trying to kind of put out there to the audience and to people. So it's very important for us to, it is something very baby like the social media, and it's still something that you need to adapt to, but it's very important for you to know who you are in that kind of world, and then it will be easier for you to translate who you are using any platform in any time, in whether you're a student and then you're a mother and then you're a wife and then a mother, but let's hope so. But all of that would be translated kind of in the same way, you being you rather than you trying to be something in another platform.
Well said. Thank you so much, ladies. We're going to open up the floor right now for any questions the audience may have.
Thank you so much for your talk. So I have a question. Can a brand be successful if it's not backed up by a personality, an individual, a person? Can it still be successful?
Definitely, yes. And I think to answer that question very specifically is because once you treat any brand, and that's something I do in my agency, so once you treat any brand and you humanize it and make it as a human, you'll be able to reach people faster, and it'll be much easier for you to do that. So one of the things we do in our agency, for example, is that we sit with individuals who founded a brand, but they don't want to be the face of it, right? So what happens is that we sit with them and we try to create a whole persona for a brand. So what I do is that I ask them one question, and it's a 1 hour kind of meeting where I ask them, if that brand was a person, how would he or she be? And they would go on describing a person that is not them. So they'll say if she's a girl, she'll be saying that this brand is a man who is in his 40s, who likes to jog every day, who drinks coffee, not tea. And we go on trying to describe that one and humanize it and describe that one persona. And depending on that persona, we create the content and we kind of follow up with and it comes and it shows in the caption, it shows in the story, it shows in the style of the brand as a whole. So the more you humanize your brand and try to make a person out of it rather than selling the products that are there, I think it's very much possible for you to do that.
Thank you so much.
And I'll add to that in a sense that it's about humanizing the brand, but also about the story that you're telling as a brand. It's important, especially across social media, to build a storyline, to build something that people feel that they can connect to. If you're not going to use influencers, for example, then you need to make your page, your platforms so engaging that people are so drawn to it and need to see what you are delivering next, and they need to keep coming back to that. So there needs to be something that emotionally connects them to your brand.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Hi, thank you for all your wisdom. My question is, how important are engagements and analytics in terms of storytelling? Because you could create content also based on what your followers enjoy because they express it through their engagement, or you could simply just not care and be so true to yourself that even if something doesn't get that many likes, you still post it, right? So how important are engagements and analytics?
I think it depends on what you're trying to achieve. So if you're trying, if it's a brand and you're trying to achieve sales, then obviously engagement and analytics is extremely important because you need these things to convert into sales. If it's purely for you and it's just about what you want to deliver to an audience and what makes you feel good and you're being true to yourself as a person or a personal brand, then no, engagement and analytics is of little importance. So I think it really depends on what you are trying to achieve.
Thank you.
Hey, so my question about the content, but this question about Instagram content and which content you guys publicating more often, videos or photos, if it's brand page, okay?
Sorry, I didn't quite catch all of that, did you?
So what are you posting to the Instagram as a content? More photos or more videos?
I believe it's a combination of both, but personally, I've been liking videos more. The reason behind it, and I'm sure everyone knows here, is because they don't count the likes, they count the views, and it kind of makes you feel better. So answering your question, it's not about analytics, it's not about the numbers. At the end of the day, the way I do, at least the way I work personally, it's not about numbers whatsoever. I just create the content, and sometimes it reaches out there, sometimes don't, sometimes it's frustrating, and sometimes you work with something so hard and get nothing out of it when it comes to numbers. But it just gives you that kind of push. Videos give you that kind of push where, people are actually watching my videos, let me make more of them. And that kind of push makes you create more content and better ones with time. So personally speaking, I would always rather to have Instagram videos, not easy as photos, but it is worth it.
And generally speaking, we see Instagram as an algorithm favor videos. So if you're coming across Explore pages, I'm sure you see that the larger square on the Explore pages are always a video. So what's happening is that you're seeing that a lot more. So people that are consistently creating videos, their content is actually favored and seen more by the public. So if you are wanting to get out there and be seen more, then video is where you need to be.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies. Thank you for a great talk. My question is more on the commercial side of the whole influencer marketing. A couple of years ago, it was hard to even figure out what the ROIs were or what the real impact was in terms of being able to, define it down to a number. Obviously, there's an uplift and all that. And now we're a little bit better at it, but what do you guys see is important that needs to happen to kind of get better ROI type impression on some of the campaigns? And do you see that this will have a shelf life? Do you think, we talked about how it's going to evolve, really this whole influencer marketing and even take it to a wider kind of affiliate marketing idea was all based on word of mouth. And this has always evolved during our life and it's going to keep evolving. So what do you have to say about the commercial side of it and the evolution of it?
I have an interesting take on this because the way I see it is if you were to put an ad in a print magazine, how do you measure ROI on that? So for me, it's not that dissimilar when it comes to social media. Although you can take readership or distribution of print, what you can do is take likes, comments, engagement from social media and kind of equate them to be the same value. But when it comes to actual conversions and being able to track that, it is obviously a lot more difficult. And there are measures being taken by social media platforms to try and get better at figuring that out. But unfortunately, there are so many issues with companies that sell likes and whatnot that they are doing, that it is increasingly difficult to really understand what the conversion and what the actual ROI is from social media. So for me, it's about brands that work with influencers really doing their research on influencers and making sure they're working with somebody that really represents their brand, regardless of how many followers or how little followers that person has. But if you're working with the right kind of person that does sit with your brand, then the return should come.
Just one last question and then we're going to wrap up.
Last but not least, hi everyone. Thank you so much for a very interesting conversation. And my question would be about the people you follow. Who would you like to follow? Who is your inspirational figure? Maybe you like Eva Chen or you like Chiara Ferragni, so share with us, please. Thank you.
I follow everyone. You have no idea. As I said, I'm a consumer as much as I'm a content creator. And being a consumer means you being not very cautious when it comes to who you follow, but actually choosing the accounts that really resonates with you. So I could follow an account because the individual is really cool. And I could follow another account because the aesthetic of the page is really nice. And I could follow another account just because the product that they said is really yummy. And it really doesn't matter, to me at least, doesn't matter who I follow. So I'm not the kind of person who is very cautious about what do I follow or what would people see, who am I following, rather than treating myself as a normal consumer who would be interested in different things and inspired by different people, and then learn from that. Because the more you consume at the end of the day is the more or the better you get with your content. So it's not about being cool and having low number of following vs long number or big number of followers. It's about you being very honest with who you are, being both content creators and consumer.
I follow people to be entertained mostly. So the people that I follow are either people that inspire me. Their feed either is aesthetically beautiful and I really love the way that they photograph or videograph their content, or I follow people like Eva Chen, who you mentioned. I also love Chrissy Teigen. I think she's fantastic. That's the mother in me following other mothers that I find entertaining and fun. But then I also really love to follow, brand pages that have beautiful, beautiful content that inspires me to create beautiful content as well. There's definitely no kind of format or procedure that I follow is the same. It's whatever I come across that I really enjoy and like, and I follow them. And of course, obviously, friends as well to see what they're up to.
Thank you so much, ladies. Thank you, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the talk, and it was a real pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Sorry, just one quick announcement. Thank you all for being here. I wanted to thank our partner for this talk, the College of Fashion and Design. Please learn more about them. They have a booth right outside of our hall. Also, the garden is right across the way in Building 6, and you can discover a lot of our regional designers there. And we have a 4:30 show, Hessa Al Falasi. So please stay, enjoy the rest of the afternoon. Thanks for being with us.